The information and examples included in this summary presentation are designed to support the learning of course objectives 3.3 to 3.5, which all address measurement scales and survey design. Now, although surveys are more likely to be used within positivist research approaches, both phenomenological as well as grounded theory interpretive methods often rely on good surveys as part of the data collection process as well. So what you should be able to do in the first objective is to be able to identify and describe the following types of scales that are commonly used in the design of survey items: binary, Likert, semantic differential, and Gutman. So let's take a look at these in more detail. Suppose you are studying the effects of mindfulness meditation on student attitudes and performance. As part of your data collection, you ask a series of scale items on a survey about each subject's experiences with meditation outside the classroom. Now, note that the language in these items would need to be adjusted to meet literacy-related abilities of the subjects. So they would sound different if you were going to be surveying young children versus adults. Binary scales are nominal scales consisting of binary items that assume one of two possible values, such as yes or no, true or false, and so on. So asking the question, do you ever meditate on your own at home? The answers are yes or no, so that's just binary data. It would be nominal if you wanted to know what type of data on the scale. Now, Likert scales are very popular rating scales for measuring ordinal data in social science research. Likert scales include items that are simply worded statements to which respondents can indicate their extent of agreement or disagreement, commonly using a 4, 5, or 7-point scale ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So you could ask an item like mindfulness meditation helps me relax, and you would want to know to what degree does the respondent agree to that statement. Now, semantic differential scales are kind of interesting. These are composite or multi-item scales where respondents are asked to indicate their opinions or feelings towards a single statement using different pairs of objectives that are framed as polar opposites. Now, if you think about it, responses in this scale could be easily translated into ordinal data. So, for example, here's the one question: how would you rate participating in mindfulness meditation at the beginning of the school day? So, would you say it's helpful? Very much? Helpful somewhat? Neither helpful nor a waste of time? Or would you say it's somewhat a waste of time or a very much a waste of time? Notice how the scale, as it's laid out on the page, that takes the respondent into a rating that goes from helpful on the left to waste of time on the right. And so where they would choose to mark their rating would be kind of along that scale. And that's why you can turn the data into ordinal if you want, because you could say very much helpful is a 5, and you could say very much waste of time is a 1, and each of the numbers in between. Finally, there's the Gutman scale. This composite scale uses a series of items arranged in increasing order of intensity of the construct of interest, from least intense to most intense. This could be considered a collection of binary scales, or the set of related items could be coded to obtain an interval or ratio source. For example, you could weight the value of each yes as the item increases in intensity. So that's an example of the Gutman scale. The next objective in this group is that you should be able to use the rules for good survey item design to critique existing survey items. So let's take a look at what these rules are. So good survey items include the fact that questions should be clear and understandable. So they should be simply worded. They should be written in an active voice, and they should not contain any jargon language that would make it difficult for a typical person to really understand exactly what the question is asking or is saying. So good survey items also do not use negative language in the question or statement. Negatively worded questions such as, should students not create a weekly schedule on Monday mornings, tend to confuse many responses and lead to inaccurate responses. So such questions should be avoided, and in all cases, avoid any double negatives. So just ask the question without the word not in it. Next, do not ask ambiguous questions. Survey questions should not include words or expressions that may be interpreted differently by different respondents. For example, are you a good student could mean many different things. You're good at grades, your behavior is good, you cooperate well, you're a nice person to everyone around you. So you want to avoid using a word or just a statement that is that ambiguous and broad. Also, it's important to avoid using biased or value-laden words. Bias refers to any property of a question that encourages subjects to answer in a certain way. For example, a survey item measuring attitudes about taxes should avoid biased words, such as, I do not support the government stealing money from me in order to provide more resources for the local schools. You could just use raising taxes instead of stealing money. It means the same thing, and it doesn't insert that bias. And I have to say that in a lot of political surveys these days, a lot of items that are asked are terribly biased, and well, I won't get into it, but that's just the way it is right now. Also, you should avoid asking double-barreled questions. Double-barreled questions are those that can have multiple answers. For example, are you satisfied with your teaching load and salary is actually two questions. I can be satisfied with my teaching load, but not my salary. So how should I answer this question if it's stated as a yes or no? You should also avoid asking questions that are far too general. Sometimes questions that are too general may not accurately convey the respondent's perceptions. For example, how do you like your job is a very broad question. And if the respondent answers, not at all, then what did you really learn from that person? Not much. You should also avoid asking questions that are too detailed. Don't write unnecessarily detailed questions that serve no research purpose. For example, you might be interested in asking questions about a person's job experience as part of a study, but including specific questions asking respondents to list all the jobs, that would probably result in too much unnecessary data collection that would not be used in your study, and the respondents, it would take up far too much time for them. So you should avoid that as well. Also, avoid asking questions that are presumptuous. Nothing in a good question should address a presumption that the responder has about the variable you're measuring. For example, asking, what do you think are the benefits of charter schools, presumes that the respondent has something favorable to say about charter schools. Now, certainly they're free to say, well, there is nothing beneficial about a charter school. I think they're a waste of money, and the data shows that they aren't doing a better job than other schools, and well, you could go off on that. However, most people are going to say, well, okay, benefits, I don't know, they provide more choices. When in reality, they don't really feel as if that benefit is worth saying. I suppose go either way on that one. And finally, in this collection, you should be able to describe strategies for addressing non-response bias in survey research. So, survey research is generally notorious for its low response rates, and the lack of responses from all sectors of a population sampled can easily result in a strong bias in the results. For example, dissatisfied customers tend to be more vocal about their experience than satisfied customers, and therefore they're more likely to respond to questionnaire surveys or interview requests than the satisfied customers. As a result, any respondent sample is likely to have a higher proportion of dissatisfied customers than the underlying population from which it is drawn. This is an example of non-response bias. So it's a bias because not the sample doesn't reflect a response from a good cross-section of the people that you're trying to sample. So what are some things that you can do if you're a researcher to minimize that type of bias? Well, first of all, there is something called advance notification, and that's simple. A short letter or email sent in advance to the targeted respondents soliciting their participation in an upcoming survey can prepare them in advance and improve their propensity to respond. So that's advance notification. Not a bad idea at all. Also, relevance of content. If a survey examines issues of relevance or importance to respondents, then they are more likely to respond than to surveys that don't matter to them. And I will tell you, I do a lot of survey research, or at least I oversee the implementation of a lot of research on Radford University's campus because I'm a member of the Institutional Review Board, and we have to review all studies that involve human subjects. And I will tell you right now that the response rate for surveys that go out to college students that ask them about things that they are interested in, like their drinking habits, their musical tastes, how they choose to use streaming services like Netflix, asking questions about sex and sexual practices. When those are on the survey, response rate goes way up, as you might imagine. Another way to minimize non-response bias is to ask respondent-friendly questions. Shorter survey questionnaires tend to elicit higher response rates than longer ones. Furthermore, questions that are clear, non-offensive, and easy to respond to attract higher response rates. And online, websites are just really value customer responses for a number of different reasons. And so I have two examples of things, one from Domino's Pizza and one from Uber, just a quick, simple way for a customer to provide some data about how they felt about the service or about the product. So those responses tend to go higher for that. There's also a way to minimize non-response bias in organizations called endorsement. And this, for organizational surveys, endorsement helps. It can help to get an endorsement from a senior executive attesting to the importance of the study to the organization. So such endorsements can be in the form of a cover letter or a letter of introduction, introducing the survey, an email. All of those can improve the researcher's credibility in the eyes of those who are responding. So that's called endorsement. Then there's follow-up requests, and that's simply where you might respond to those who haven't responded to a survey. You might send them a quick message, a text or an email that says, hey, did you remember about the survey? Or the survey is still available. We'd really like your input. Those might help coax some non-responders to respond, even if they're late. Better late than never. Then there's incentives, and incentives represent anything of monetary value would be an incentive. So response rates, at least with certain populations, often increase with the use of incentives in the form of cash or gift cards, giveaways such as pens or water bottles or tote bags, entry into some kind of a lottery or a contest. All of those would be incentives. Now, they're not all money, but they all have a monetary value. It costs money to obtain those incentives. There are also non-monetary incentives, and those are things that you don't buy with money. Response rates, at least with certain populations, might increase with the use of incentives that for example, that use peer pressure, or some kind of comparison with like data that indicates here's how many people have responded to this survey in different organizations, and here's where you are, that kind of thing. I know for me, when we want to when my college is trying to solicit help for the United Way, to get people to participate in the United Way giving campaign, we only report the percent of faculty who actually participate. And those numbers are communicated across the university. And so the different colleges and the different departments in the colleges all have numbers associated with the percent of faculty. And I'm not going to lie, it really does. You look at it and think, well, I don't want to be one of the ones who brings our number down. So that kind of an incentive has nothing to do with me getting money, but it has everything to do with me being guilted, I suppose, guilted into giving. And I don't know, maybe that's better than nothing, isn't it? Finally, the last way to minimize non-response bias strategy is through just ensuring that the responses data will be private and that they will not fall into the hands of third parties at all. Nothing in it is going to be sold to another company or is going to end up in the hands of your boss or anything like that. That might help also to improve response rates. So these are all some common strategies that you use to try to minimize response rate. So in your study, if you're designing your study and you know that you're going to be including a survey, you might want to include some of these strategies as part of your plan to help ensure that you get the highest response rate from the best cross-section of subjects as you can.